meeting is convening at 9:04 a.m. on October 7th at the Health Licensing Office in Salem, Oregon. I will now call for Julia Barter here. Simone Gillingham? Here. Raj Kegel?
Here.
Bert Connell?
Here.
Sarah Lowe? Lowe, I apologize. Here. Jerry Youker?
Here.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Youker, but that's close.
Thank you. Members, during the course of the meeting, please wait to speak until recognized by the chair. Once you have been recognized, please state your last name. Audience members are asked to sign in at the attendance roster. Public and interested parties' feedback may be heard during the public interested parties' feedback period. It's indicated on the agenda. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and a protocol with conducting board business. This meeting is called to order.
Good job. So this is Sylvie. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Someone would like to make a motion? I move to board members. What is your last name? Gillingham. Anybody second? I could not hear. Do we have a second?
This is Sarah Lowe. I second the motion.
So it's Simone and Sarah.
A motion has been made. I call the roll. Julia Barter, aye. Raj Kegel?
Yeah, aye.
Simone Gillingham? Aye. Bert Connell?
Aye.
Sarah Lowe? Aye. Jerry Youker?
Aye.
Okay, this is Sylvie. So the motion carries. This is going to be a little bit hard, but we're on item number 3 on the agenda. Normally we're in a room where we can see each other, so this is a little awkward. But we do have 2 new board members who are on the phone, so Sarah and Jerry. Sarah, do you want to give everybody a little story about who you are and why you're interested in being on the board, and we'll kind of go through that way?
Sure. First, just let me apologize because my dog's barking in the background. I'm home today, so they're a little bit loud and barky. My name is Sarah Lowe. I am a clinical dietitian at Shriners up in Portland. I worked there for about 5 years. I got my master's at OHSU. I have 2 twin girls that are 10 and doing 5th grade from home this year, so that's always been a fun challenge. I was interested in being on the board just like to get a little bit more involved in the licensing and in just be part of the Oregon dietitian group a little bit more. So that's about it.
Right, perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Jerry, you want to give everybody a little bit of information about you?
Yes, I'm Jerry Youker, and I'm an endocrinologist. I'm in private practice in East Portland, and my practice includes diabetes and lipid disorders, and is very involved with nutrition and health. And I was asked to be on the board by Bert, and said I would be happy to contribute whatever I can. And so it's enjoyable to be here.
Perfect. Thanks, Jerry. So, Yulia, you want to fill Sarah and Jerry in a little bit about you and what you do?
I am in private practice in Hillsboro, Oregon. I am both licensed as a registered dietitian and licensed professional counselor. I'm board certified in advanced diabetes management, and I've mostly specialized in is a bridge and integration between mental health and nutrition, and there's a heavy leaning on endocrine health and also the GI and multiple ways to bridge the two things together. I've been in practice since 2000, so yeah, been 20 years.
Thanks, Julia. Simone, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Yes, I'm Simone Gillingham, and I am down in Medford, Oregon. I work at the VA in White City, and I work for a program called Home-Based Primary Care. It specializes in geriatrics, and I'm board certified in geriatric nutrition. And I have a kindergartner who's doing all right now. So that has been a big challenge. But nice to meet the new members.
Perfect. And Russ, do you want to give the two new board members a little bit about you?
Okay, I'm the public member. I was previously on the chair of the Athletic Trainers Association, both nationally as board president and as board president subsequently. I taught at Willamette University, so therefore I was a professor and taught sports medicine and anatomy. I live in Salem.
Thanks, Russ. And Bert, you want to fill everybody in about what you do?
Yes, thank you. I currently am an adjunct instructor at OHSU in the dietetic internship. I teach in the area of food systems management. I have 45 years of experience in management as well in hospital, as well as a program director of a nutrition and dietetics program. So I'm retired, but enjoy still being involved in teaching.
Thanks, Bert. So here in the room, there's a whole bunch of us in the room because we're staff and we're allowed to sit more than 6 feet apart. I'm Sylvie, so obviously you two new board members haven't physically seen me, but I'm the director here. I've been here since 2009. Oh my, 11 years. Oh, sheesh.
And a wonderful job.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for quite some time. And then also sitting in the room with me is Bob Bothwell. He's the regulatory manager. Ann Thompson's in here. She's the policy analyst who deals with this board. We have 16 boards and programs, so we've kind of split them in half. And then we also have Sarah who's in here, and she's the one who processes the applications and the renewals. And then we have Callie who's in here. She does a lot of the forms and mainly the website and a bunch of other things, audits, all kinds of other stuff. But the website keeps her pretty busy with 16 boards and programs. And then Maria is sitting in the back, and she's the one who you obviously has received emails from and lots of correspondence on. And she is in the process of switching over her duties to April. So you hopefully will start getting emails from April instead of Maria. But she's in the back running all the recording equipment because, as you know, all of our meetings are recorded and then posted out onto the website for anybody to listen to after the fact. Anybody have any questions so far? All right, we will move right along. We're on the agenda under item number 4. So we have a couple action items for you guys to vote on. First one is approval of the 2021 meeting dates. We have picked April 21st and October 6th, both starting at 9 a.m. I do have a calendar in front of me in case those dates do not work for you guys, but have a discussion.
Any discussion about this, guys? Please, when you speak, identify yourself by your last name. No discussion? Okay, I will, anyone would like to make a motion to approve these dates?
Can we repeat those dates, please?
Absolutely. This is Brogdorf. April 21st at 9 a.m. and October 6th at 9 a.m.
October 6th. Okay. Thank you.
Sarah Lowe, ask a motion to approve.
Thank you. Anyone second?
Rusty.
Gilly? I second. Is it Gillingham? Thank you. Yes. The motion has been made. I'll make a roll call. Brogdorf? Aye. Gillingham? Aye. Hagel?
Aye.
Connell?
Aye.
Lowe? Aye. Youker?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has been carried.
So this is Sylvie again. Next item is to vote on chair and vice chair. This is done for every year. Does not mean you have to change anything, but you still have to vote on it. So if you want to keep it as is, you might want to ask Julie and Simone if that's okay with them, but you're welcome to keep it as it is. I do believe neither of them are getting close to terming out. Julia, you go until, as long as you're willing to do a second term. Your first term is over on 4/20 of 21.
Okay.
And Simone,
I'm happy to do it.
yeah. And Simone, your first term goes until February 20th of 22.
Okay. I'm fine. Anyone else would like to? I'd be happy to continue the chair unless someone else would like to serve as the chair. I would like to make sure that opportunity is available to others. If otherwise, anyone would like to move to approve the chair and vice chair?
You want a second?
This is Sylvie. Somebody needs to make a motion to keep the chair and
I
vice.
need a motion, please.
Yeah, to keep the chair and vice chair as is, which is Julia is chair and Simone is vice chair.
This is Sarah Lowe. I make a move to keep chair and vice chair as is.
Second? Anyone second?
This is Connell, second.
Okay, the motion has been made. I call the roll. Brogdorf, aye. Gillingham? Aye. Hagel?
Aye.
Connell?
Aye.
Lowe? Aye. Youker?
Aye.
The motion has been carried. Thank you.
Perfect, you guys. Okay, so this is Sylvie again. Let's move on. We're on reports. Item number 5, director's report. So, kind of want to fill you in on the state of affairs of the state as a whole. There is basically a hiring freeze due to unknown revenues due to the COVID and then also because of the fires and all kinds of other issues. So our office normally has 34 positions. However, we currently have 7 of those vacant. We did finally get the authority to fill one of them, one of the inspector positions, so he has interviews next week. However, we still have a lot of vacancies, which really slows down the process. We are also closed to the public. You can only come in by appointment only and only for certain things. I'll get into a lot more details. I can talk about both of them right now because it's the next one on the agenda. So the COVID-19 has drastically changed how we do things. So currently we have 2 phones sitting next to each other. One the public gets to call into, one the board members get to call into. However, we did get approved to have MS Teams, which is, if you're not a techie kind of person, it's kind of similar to Zoom. We do not have it up and running yet, but hopefully we will be able to get that up and running. I do believe we're going to have to buy a bunch of cameras and then make sure it all works. But then we will be able to hopefully see each other during board meetings. However, we obviously will physically not be in the same location. So hopefully that will be coming. Because I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to be this social distancing for quite some time. So we're working on that. Obviously, we're allow people still to come in and take their test in order to get licensed. Not that dietitians need to do that. But all applications for dietitians, they have to be mailed in and they have to renew either through the mail or online because we're not open. So it's just a strange new world that we're in. And then we are also, Bob's group, the inspectors, are also part of the educating team that goes out and, quote, educates some of the professions that we regulate on the protocols for COVID-19. So they're awfully busy, and he works very closely with OSHA, because us and OSHA and obviously a few other agencies are all working on making sure that everybody stays within the guidelines that the public health has given out and what the governor's given out. So that's keeping us really busy. But any questions on any of that? Okay, well, we will move on to licensing and statistics. So on the slide that shows registrations issued, renewals processed, and the percentage of people who renew online. And so for those, Sarah and Jerry, that are new, state government's year is a little bit odd compared to everybody else's year. So when it says Q1 of 2019, that is actually July, August, and September of 2018. I know it gets confusing, but so we break it out by quarter. Our year goes from July 1 through June 30th. And then we do everything in bienniums, so 2-year cycle. So we get a budget for 2 years, everything's done for a 2-year cycle. But hopefully you've had a chance to read through some of these statistics. I'll go through them, but if you have any questions or not understanding what I'm saying, you're more than welcome to ask. I know you're new and we're not in person, so just interrupt me. So dietitians, they get a license through us, but they are not required to have a license in order to practice. They just cannot call themselves, in Oregon, cannot call themselves a licensed dietitian unless they have the Oregon license. They can be a registered dietitian, and a registered dietitian is through the National Association, not through the state. So they're 2 different things.
We need to change the registrations to license.
So this shows how many the first column shows how many new licenses we issued. The second column shows how many licenses we renewed. And licenses are active through the last day of the month, 1 year from the date of issuance. So they renew them every year. And not all at the same time. It depends on when you got your license. And then the last column just shows the percentage of individuals who renew online. And obviously those statistics are a little skewed also because the Q1 of 2020 says 0, and that's not true. So these numbers are not right. So we can get some corrected numbers out of there because obviously they're not counting correctly.
Yeah, we were, sorry board, this is Ann. We were having some difficulties extracting that information from our database, but we are currently working to correct that.
Because dietitians a vast majority of them do renew online. A lot of, not everybody obviously because they get private practices, but a lot of individuals who work for big health systems, they'll have a person who makes sure that they get renewed online and they're monitoring their license stuff. So any questions on that slide before I move on? Okay, you guys are a silent group. All right. Next slide, I'll kind of explain it, but it shows age and gender. So by law, you have to give us your date of birth. So we have your age. Obviously, there's one person that's blank, so there's some applicant who's entered into the system who doesn't have a date of birth. However, you do not have, you can either say that you're male or female, you can choose to not answer, or you can put in whatever thing that you go by. And so that's where you'll start getting a little bit of those odd colors, because either that person did not identify or identified as something other than male or female. So, but for the majority of this profession, it's a very predominantly female. And younger, which is interesting. Because we have some of these same, because we have these same charts for all of our other boards. Some of them have where all the big tall bars are up in the 58 to 65 and higher, which is kind of not, I guess, not necessarily a bad way, but you have a lot of people who may be retiring out and not necessarily enough coming in to do the profession. So your guys' chart looks very good about longevity. So we'll move on to the next slide. The next slide just shows that same information but on a long-term trend. So again, that first line there where it says fiscal year 17 quarter 1, that's July, August, and September of 2016. And this is the quarterly average. So then you can get up to our current. So your growth, you're constantly growing, which is also another good thing. Any questions? So somebody who's on the public phone, can you please mute your phone because we can hear you typing? All right, so back to the slides. Next slide is the financials. Again, it has our, our year is, and it kind of explains it up on the top in the blue. So it'll show 18, 19, 20, and we've started 21 because that started in July of 20. I know it gets confusing, so if you have questions about that, just make sure and let me know. It'll show your revenues and expenditures. And then you have a cash balance, and that cash balance stays. So each board and program underneath the office has their own separate fund underneath the office. So all the money that's received from dietitians stays in that fund, and then the expenses then go towards that fund. Down on the bottom, kind of in the grayed out area, it'll show you the percentages, and I'll kind of get into the details of that and how it works. But there's a percentage, and they'll change yearly because the office changes yearly. So we try to redo our assessments every July 1, based on the fact that the office is either grown, new license types have come in, new programs have come in, new boards have come in, or the legislation has made some drastic change to us. So the shared assessment, which is that first one, shared assessment is pretty much something that goes to all 16 boards and programs. So for instance, our rent, our utilities, it gets divvied out to all 16 boards and programs. So for you guys specific, currently, you pay 1.292% of that. So cosmetology pays the majority because they have way more licensees than you guys do. The next line down is a small board assessment. So there are three positions. Currently one of them is vacant, so it's not costing anything. But there's 3 positions where they work on just the small boards, which means they do not work on cosmetology. So cosmetology does not pay for them, but those 3 individuals are divvied out between the 15 other boards and programs. So your guys' percentage is the 9.457% of that. And then examinations, you guys are 0 because we do not administer a dietitian or dietetic exam in Oregon. They take the national exam. And the next line down is inspections. We do not do inspections for you guys. Only boards that have inspections have to pay for inspectors. So those are where your expenses come from. And so the office, just so everybody understands, the office itself does not have any money. So every bill that comes into the office gets divvied out based on what it's for. to either one specific board or program, all of them, or a few of them. It kind of depends on what that is. Does anybody have any questions on how that works? You guys are easy today. All right. So we're going to move on to the regulatory report. I have this. Usually people will have a little bit more questions because this doesn't give you enough detail. We do not have an executive session on this agenda, so we do not get into the details of a case unless we are in an executive session. So Bob's going to go over the regulatory report with you real quick, and then we'll move into policy.
Hi, good morning. This is Bob Bothwell for the record. So we have one biennium on the board, and we have had 3 complaints this biennium. 2 are closed, and 1 remains open.
So this is Sylvia again. I know that's not a lot of detail, and it usually has a lot more questions than it does answers. But we'll have an executive session on the agenda when we need to get you guys into the details of the case. Sometimes these cases are things that the board does not need to get involved in, such as, for instance, we would do an audit and they didn't have their continuing education that they were supposed to have. That would be a case, because then now they would be under investigation for not obtaining the required continuing education in order to qualify for renewal. Or, for instance, they said they took the yearly survey. You have to take that the workforce survey in order to renew. So they said they took it, but however, then we have record that they didn't take it. Then so those are the kind of cases that we would deal with internal without the board. But if it comes to a case where it talks about more of a practice, something that they did in their practice, some sort of community standard that they broke, something like that, that's where we would then get the board together, have an executive session, have you review stuff, and help us make some decisions on things. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Next thing on our agenda, let's talk a little bit about, I know you guys, it's been a long time since you guys have met, so you may have forgotten what you talked about. But at the last meeting, you guys talked a little bit about how the National Commission on Dietetic Registration was kind of changing or looking to change their requirements for registration. And so Anne reached out to them and got this letter that hopefully you've all had a chance to read. And then we also attached the actual current statute that you have at the moment, which is right afterwards. So let's talk a little bit about this and about your guys' thoughts and opinions, and then we'll go from there. So Yulia, I think you brought this up at the last board meeting.
This is Brogdorf. Yes, and as I read this letter, and I'm reading the current statute, one question that I would be unclear about is if we choose as a board to proceed to match our requirements to CDR's requirements, how will this impact, what language will we need to put in place to support those RDs who want to become LDs, who were grandfathered as RDs, who have only the baccalaureate degree, and later on they want to apply for license in the state of Oregon, but now if you make new rules that as of such and such date, you need to be having a master's graduate level degree as the bare minimum, but these people were not licensees prior to that date, but they were RDs prior to that date. Is there language to accommodate for those persons?
So this is Sylvie. Currently, none of that matters. If CDR changes their regulations or their requirements are going to be higher than the state requirements. So if the state wanted to make the requirements the same, then the statute would need to be changed. And at the time the statutes would be changed, then is when you write in, it's called the grandfather clause. They don't like that word because it's ageist. Yeah, it's not politically correct. But that's what everybody still calls it. So then you put in there anybody who, because it depends on how you end up writing the statutes. But you put something in there that anybody licensed or registered prior to, everybody registered after. I mean, all that would go in there if you were to change the statutes. Does that make sense?
This is Barbara. Yes, that makes sense. I mean, my concern about opening up the whole statute to make this change is, in the past, it has been something that we would like to proceed with caution as far as opening up the statute. It's because if you feel like you're going to make such a big step, then there'll be a lot more things to take into consideration and possible consequences of opening up the statute. Do other board members have any comments?
This is Gillingham. I guess my thought is that I feel like if the statutes are not in line with CDRs, so one of the criteria right now in the statutes is that somebody has completed the supervised practice. But so like new dietitians, if they're going to apply for to be a licensed dietitian, and they wouldn't even be able to complete that supervised practice if they don't have the graduate degree. That's going to be the CDR requirement. So I think there has to be language for like the grandfather clause, or but I feel like our statutes do need to match that of CDR. I mean, do people agree with that, or I don't know.
Thank you, Simone. This is Barbara. Would our policy analyst be kind to please share kind of the bird view information regarding what may or may not happen to the our ability to have license and possibility of either moving to Practice Act versus Title Act as we currently have, and if should we choose to open up the statutes and bring it to the legislative body. Would you be kind to talk about that?
Sure. So this is Sylvie. I've done it many times. So for one, the office would not bring that forward. This board and this office would not be the ones that would bring forward any change. So hopefully you guys have some sort of association, or you're welcome to do it as your own individual capacity, but not as a board member, because remember, we are all underneath the governor's office, and we do not bring legislative concepts forward to change the practice of something. That's an association thing. So if a group was willing to get together and bring a legislative concept forward, then I could sit down with them and explain to them what to do and how to do it and what to say and the actual verbiage that would need to be needed and all that jazz. So I will work with whomever does that, but the office does not bring that forward. And whomever is doing that would also want to make sure that they have a legislator that's willing to bring the concept forward. So usually associations have those kind of connections, and they also have lobbyists, because there's a lot to the process of getting a law changed. It's just not as easy, clean cut. But what would occur is so session starts in February, so somebody would need to be doing it now, because legislators are working on their legislative concepts now, and there's a very clear timeline about when they have to have their bills set. So if somebody, meaning a legislator, is willing to take on this concept, that they would have to actually create a bill and add it to a bill that changes the legal definition of what qualifies. So if that does not occur, for one, CDR is not changing their stuff until 2024.
You have time.
But the thing is even if they change their stuff to go to a higher level degree, our statutes say a bachelorette or post-baccalaureate degree. So even if CDR goes up, they're still going to qualify for a license in Oregon if the statutes are not changed. I mean, I understand that you want the statutes to match, which is a great idea, but there's a big process that goes into that, and it's not an overnight thing. But like I said, I'm more than willing to work with whomever wants to kind of bring that forward.
Thank you, Sylvie. This is Barbara. My understanding is if so happen that legislature will open up the statutes to reconsider this particular verbiage or any other one, there are also interested in other stakeholders. Some may or may not be welcoming licensed dietitians licensed to be the case in the state of Oregon. So just to share with the board, this also opens up possibility of losing ability to have license in the state of Oregon. At the same time, we may also gain ability to have a Practice Act instead of Title Act that we currently have in the state of Oregon. So there is a lot more possible costs and benefits of going forward with making such requests for the change, for the association making requests for the change. And with the current verbiage, since it may not align with CDR in the future, anyone who is CDR registered will qualify as a license with the state of Oregon. But we do, and correct me, Sylvia, please, if I'm wrong, but we currently do have some licensees in the state of Oregon that are not registered dietitians. And our license is comprehensive to include those persons to be able to have license in Oregon without being registered. Is that correct?
This is Sylvia, that is correct. We do have an individual, and I do believe there's only one. The thing is back when these statutes were last opened, which is, I would say 2011-ish, I think, there was discussions about not requiring individuals to maintain their CDR registration, which is why the statute's written the way it is, to where it was, quote, mirroring what the CDR had. Legislation has gone away from that. So, and legislation changes as new legislators get in. They have a way that they like to write things, and 5 years later they like to write them differently. So they're now writing it to where if there's a national association, they'll actually name that national association or its predecessor. So like Russ kind of knows, athletic trainers, as long as you're registered with BOC, which is their national certification, and BOC sends us verification that you're registered with them, you then qualify for a license in Oregon. And it's very specific. It keeps us away from then having to have your transcript for your bachelor's degree, having to have a passing score on the exam. You are just either registered with them, you get a license in Oregon. So it's actually the way that they've written the statutes has changed over the years. So the best way to do it is to write it to where it's CDR, because then anytime CDR changes their statute or their qualifications, you don't have to change your law. So if you were to open it up, it would be better to write it that way currently. If we wait another 5 to 6 years, the legislation may change their mind again, and you may end up writing your statutes in a little bit different. But we can send you some, and like I said, I'm totally willing to work with whatever association wants to kind of work on this. Give them the pros and cons, the people who they should be talking to. I know that there's a few little scuttlebutts about people who are not dietitians but nutritionists. So there's this nutritionist group that they're not licensed in Oregon, and I'm not real sure if they have some sort of registration with CDR, because obviously we don't license them. And so I don't know if they may want to be added to this group so that they can then get a license and have some sort of different qualification. But those, when Yulia was talking about when you open up your statutes, there's certain things that may occur. That's one thing that could occur. You always take a risk when you open your statutes of, somebody saying, hey, well, I want to be a part of this, or hey, why do we have this? And we just do a lot of outreach prior to, so that people are aware of what we're trying to bring forward and why we're trying to bring it forward, so we then later don't have conflict or any kind of negative, because if the legislation sees two groups not getting along or not agreeing on something, they're not going to pass the bill. So we want to work with everybody prior to. Does that kind of make sense to everybody?
This is Connell. I would like to state my acceptance of what is being said, particularly as we look at Section C under number 3, pass an examination prescribed by the office. The way the examination works is that you do not get authority to take the registration exam unless you have met all the requirements. And so as of January 1, 2024, the requirement is going to be that you have a master's degree. And so you're not going to be able to take an examination unless you have a master's degree beginning in January 2024. So I think that this provides the necessary information so that we do not need to go back to the legislature. Am I thinking correct?
So this is Sylvia. Sorry, I want to clarify real quick on that. So in rule, if you look at rule, so you're going to have about 3 years where that's not necessarily going to be true. So in the rule, it says that you have to have taken and passed that exam within 3 years preceding the date of application. So you'll still have people who say they took that exam December 30th of 23. They have 3 years to apply for us, and they still get to count that. So you're still going to have that kind of back and forth. And for one, we have one person who's not CDR registered out of all the applicants that we've had since I've been here. So the odds of people coming through the quote piecemeal piece are very slim. But just so you know that option is still there.
Okay. Thank you.
Russ Daigle here. We went through basically the similar process with athletic training, and I would highly recommend you don't change anything.
This is Gillingham, and now that we've discussed it a bit, it does seem like to me that what we currently have would cover new dietitians as well as dietitians who maybe don't meet the new CDR criteria. So thank you for the discussion because it makes more sense to me.
And board, this is Ann. If I could, Julie has mentioned it a couple of times and Sylvie reiterated, opening your statutes is always a little risky because once that process is going, it kind of takes on a life of its own and you don't really know sometimes what you're going to end up with. But if you're committed to trying to go from a Title Act to a Practice Act, that's a big step. And if you really, really want that, that's certainly something you can move toward because the Title Act is a little frustrating, but again, caution. Thank you.
So this is Sylvie. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns, or want to talk any more about CDR's change?
So this is Youker, and I wondered when I looked at this, what percentage of our current licensed dietitians did have master's degrees, and what percentage do not? Do we know that?
So this is Sylvie. We do not. So we do not keep track of their education if they're CDR registered. So CDR would have that information, but we don't because we don't require them to submit that. If we get a certification from CDR that says, hey, here they're registered and in good standing, so we do not.
So again, this is Youker, and I wondered what percentage of our new applicants had master's degrees, and what percentage of these people would be affected by the statute change?
Yeah, and this is Sylvie. Without requesting that information from CDR, I don't know. And they're gonna change their regulations regardless of our statute. So our statute will be actually less than theirs, so they're raising their bar. And so anybody who's going to get CDR registered after January 24 will have to have that higher level of education. But what they're doing is anybody who is already CDR certified, they're not taking it away and saying now you must, go back to school.
This is Billingham. So essentially, though, with the current statute, if somebody after the January 1st, 2024, if they let their CDR registration lapse, then they could, if they don't meet the qualifications to renew it, like the graduate degree, so then they could essentially still practice as a licensed dietitian without CDR.
Correct. So this is Sylvie again. So the CDR certification is a qualification to get an Oregon license. It is not a qualification for renewal. So which means you do not have to maintain your CDR registration if you do not want to. You have to have it, or the equivalent, in order to get a license in Oregon. But once you're licensed in Oregon, we don't look at it again unless CDR has taken some sort of disciplinary action against you and revoked your registration. Obviously then we're going to look at you because obviously you did something, probably something bad, and we're going to look into it. But does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. Gillingham again. So I just think that's something to think about, that could possibly result in more licensed dietitians practicing without a CDR certification. I know you said there's one currently, but it seems like there's potential for that to increase in the future. I just think it's something to, I guess, keep in mind.
Well, one would assume, logically, that you would want to maintain your CDR, because if you don't, then you're going to have to go back to school and get a higher level degree. So one would assume that they would want to keep their CDR, but we, like I said, we also do not keep track of who maintains their CDR registration, because we have our own disciplinary authority, and so we don't need to know if you're currently registered, because we have you under our license. And we have our own authority to do an investigation and to deal with complaints. It's more of just the original qualification to get a license.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this is Diane Stadler. I'm calling in. I don't know if I'm able to speak during this time, or do
Diane, you're gonna have to wait till public comment.
Okay, great, I will.
Okay. Okay, board members, any more discussion on this? And like I said, if you have anybody who wants to move forward with whether changing it to a Practice Act versus a Title Act, wants to change the licensing requirements, or change anything in the statutes, I'm willing to work with that group. However, we cannot, as an office, be bringing that concept forward.
Mrs. Brandon, thank you for the discussion, everyone.
Okay, we're going to move on. We've got a couple more things to talk to you about. Those of you who are licensed dietitians know about this, but the workforce survey, you have to take a survey every year in order to qualify to renew. Those survey results, and you're not the only one, there's a whole gamut of medical related professions that have to take that survey. And so, but we did include in here the dietitian survey stuff, so because they break it out by profession. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to read that. But if you have any questions or any comments, now would be time to talk about the survey results.
This is Proctor. Is this going to be mailed to the licensees, all these pictures and all these photographs?
It was.
So it was emailed out.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Email, okay.
Yep. So Ann emailed it out, and well, it's been a while because you guys haven't met for a while. She did it on December 5th of last year.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
That was kind of, this is Ann, Yulia and members of the board. It was really kind of cool. We've been talking about this workforce survey for a long time. And when they came out with all these slides and all this information, it was just kind of really nice to say, okay, this is what you're contributing to, and get to send that out. So.
Does anybody have any thing that they want to talk about with the survey results?
This is Proctor. I'm looking at the page 4 of the graph, and I noticed that 20% are in diabetes care of some sort. And I'm just curious to notice that what a large portion is also in private practice, and then how we are distributed to specialty in the state.
It's interesting information, huh? Anybody else have any comments? Okay, we'll move right along. Next item is talking about cultural competency and continuing education and your guys' rules. And I can't remember how much detail we got into last meeting, but Anne's got the bill here in front of you so that if you have any questions, we can refer back to that. But then also she has the actual draft rule. So again, this is how we do things. Anything in bold is new. Anything with a line through it is what we're taking out. Anything in yellow means you need to make a decision. And so hopefully you've read through this, but we need to also talk about the rules, for one. Talk about the bill, talk about the rules, and then we're going to get to the rule schedule. And our goal is to try and get this implemented by January 1 of 21, knowing that it does not go into effect until July 1 of 21. However, we want to make sure licensees know that this is coming and it's mandatory and they have to do it. So we've already sent out some correspondence to them to say, hey, this is coming. But we want to get the rules up and running and going in advance so that they're not blindsided for those who have to renew after July 1. Because all of a sudden they're going to go to renew and they're going to say, hey, I didn't know anything about this. And so we want to get it in the rule in advance so that they know it's coming. Does that make sense?
Doctor, I have one question, and perhaps Sylvia Ann can help us navigate the document. The requirement of the 1 hour of cultural competency continuing education could be either from approved by Oregon Health Authority or meet requirements. I have difficulty navigating and be clear what are the requirements of Oregon Health Authority.
You're correct. We have that same issue. So we've been in contact with them. They're supposed to be developing those. They haven't yet. So yes, we're in that same dilemma.
Doctor, I'm not exactly feeling all that comfortable proceeding with voting in a particular rule that we really do not know what it entails. I mean, I think this is very critical piece of information that we need to have outlined to know what it is exactly we are.
Right. So this is Sylvia. I get that dilemma, but what the bill says is what we have to do. So in the bill, so that's why we included the bill, because we knew we'd have this conversation. So in the bill, it says that it must. So the board shall encourage. So here's the word. It's encourage. We're going to encourage you, but it's not required, the completion of continuing education that is approved through the Oregon Health Authority. So it's encouraged but not required.
Do you want me to feel that one?
This is Kelly. Where's that language, the encourage?
So it's in the bill on page 2.
And it's also in our rules.
Okay.
So it is about a quarter of the way down, little d, where it says a board shall encourage.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Anne. We talked about this a little bit at our last meeting, which feels like 65 years ago. So perhaps some background will help Yulia and some of the other members. This particular concept, this cultural competency and this list of boards, was introduced by the legislature in a previous session, and they had encouraged these professions and the boards to adopt cultural competency in their continuing education. It was encouraged. The classes were going to be approved, or the materials were going to be approved by another small satellite in the Oregon Health Authority universe called the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Well, as so often happens when you have multiple agencies involved, we're all on our own timelines, right? And we have to do something by a certain date, and we're dependent on another agency or an offering from another group who may not be on the same timeline. And when we presented this to our previous boards a few years ago, that particular office had not approved that many classes, courses, materials that they could take. So it wasn't the concept of cultural competency, but the offerings and the requirement that they take those offerings through the Office of Equity and Inclusion that made our boards kind of go, oh, I don't think our time has come for this. Well, Representative Kotek said, okay, we want to require this now. What's nice is the Office of Equity and Inclusion, when it talks about the classes that or materials that have been approved by the Oregon Health Authority, the list of offerings is much more extensive now. The list is actually being actively maintained. That office has really, it's a very small office. I think there's 3 people in that entire agency. And they've kind of been working with us because we're way ahead of some of the other boards in the rulemaking process. So they've done a lot more as far as, they have a matrix of skills that they want these courses to touch on, but they haven't distilled it down to a, quote, skills list yet. But they do have a matrix. Availability, is it offered online? Is it offered throughout the state? I mean, they have like a set of core values, and their list is on their website, and there's just a lot more now than there were even a year ago. And a lot of it comes from pressure from us, which is, if you're going to require our professionals to have this, you better have something for them to take. So when it says approved by the Health Authority, Office of Equity and Inclusion has, it's an Excel spreadsheet, is several pages now of offerings. Does that answer some of your questions, Yulia?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Anne.
Of course.
And what are the typical fees for these 1-hour courses? Do you happen to know?
The fees? Okay. I asked them about the costs associated with some of these courses, and because that came up at another one of our board meetings, and I was told by the Office of Equity and Inclusion that cost was not a deciding factor when including one of these courses on their list. It more had to do with core concepts covered in the materials, the qualities of the materials, and the availability.
So this is Sylvie. Yulia, just so you know, they don't like reach out to find people. So usually associations are sending them and saying, hey, we're offering this class, will you approve it? And so they don't necessarily pay attention to dollar amounts because they're more looking at the content of the class. And so you can charge, a $5,000 class, and they're like, as long as you're covering the content, sure. Or you can offer a free class as long as the content, so they're not looking at the price, but they're also not the ones who are doing the class. They're just approving the class. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Gillingham. Is there a process if somebody had a class that was offered through their employer? Is there a process to have that course approved?
This is Sylvie. Yes. So you would then, hopefully between now and July, they, meaning the health authority, will have their clear list that says, in order to be approved, here's what the class must have, and it should have A, B, C, and D. So that you don't have to then go and have every single class looked at by them. You just know that, does my class have A, B, C, and D? And if yes, then that would qualify. So that's kind of where they need to get their matrix all figured out. But that's where you would just have that class. You would keep it in your file folder, because we don't physically want your continuing education unless you get audited. So you would literally have that in your file folder, and then if you got audited, you would say, hey, here's a class that I took, my employer did it, it was a 2-hour class, we talked about A, B, C, whatever. So that's kind of how this works in reality. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And this is Ann. If it helps what Sylvie said, there's also the Office of Equity and Inclusion has a pretty good website. They even have a tab off to the side that says Cultural Competency Continuing Education, and you can click on that. And it not only offers, shows the matrix of classes that are available and what professionals that it would be appropriate for. They even have a whole how do I get my class approved? What do I have to do? And they have phone numbers there. And if you've got, Portland Community College that's offering something, they can certainly reach out, and the Office of Equity and Inclusion is pretty quick on the turnaround. They just check it against the matrix that they have for availability, and you can get on the list. So it's a pretty dynamic, low red tape process.
Proctor, once this goes into effect, it would be nice to send links to all of these sources to our licensees so they have a place to start.
This is Sylvia, yes. So our website's going to have it. We'll send out, obviously a lot more communication. We did send out back in July just a real quick email out to, because you're only one of 4 boards that have to do this. So we sent a quick email out just saying, hey, this is coming, you need to be ready, because it's all of a sudden going to go into effect. Well, you need to know prior to it going into effect that you have to do it, because once you renew after July 1, you'll have to have had cultural competency as part of your continuing education in the past, not moving forward. Anybody who renews after July will have to have it. So we want to let people know now that this is coming so that you can have the class between now and then, so that you don't get in trouble after July 1. So, but yes, our goal, that's why we're doing everything so early, is to try and make sure that we're not sneaking up on anybody and getting them in trouble by not educating them in advance.
This is Proctor. So it sounds like we need to go forward with the vote on this particular rule. However, this is secondary to the statutory change to the bill that we have here in front of us, and yet we are open to what public, we're going to send it for the members to comment and have it open period for comments. What type of insight would be really considered, provided that we have a legislation that requires us to go forward? What exactly are we asking the public to comment on?
Right, this is Sylvie. We will put it out for public comment. So public comment goes out, I do believe, November 1 through November 28. We do not tell people what to comment on. So we just tell them, these rules are open, here's what the changes are going to be. We give them a blurb about why the changes, how they affect, and who they affect, and all that kind of stuff. But we don't tell them what to say. So they're welcome to say anything and everything. And then you guys will review all those comments, and that will be hopefully at your December 10th, which we haven't got to that subject yet. You'll review all those comments, and if anything can be changed or we should change, then we'll change it. If not, you'll still review all the comments, address the comments, and then we'll move forward with not changing, because like if they have a suggestion about maybe have it, I don't know, 1 CE every 10 years. Well, you can't do that because the law says it has to be at least every other year. And so we will still have to talk about that. But it's more about, letting them express their opinions about anything to do with the rule, whether they complain about there's not enough classes or the classes are too expensive. But, like I said, we don't tell them what to comment on. We want all of their comments, and then we address that and talk about that at your December meeting.
And board, this is Ann. One of the reasons I put the number 1 and I highlight it in yellow is that is something that you guys can talk about. And I mean, I started with 1 because that was the smallest unit that I could think of. It's completely up to you guys. Would you like to have more? And when it comes to the rulemaking process, when you review public comments, it's always easier to do less. Like if you guys decided that 20 hours, you want 20 hours of cultural competency, and all these rules, these comments come in, they're like, oh my God, that's so much. Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, I can't, that is got a terrible fiscal impact. You can always lower it, right? And before you vote final. It's always easier to do less. What we're trying to get away from is sudden increases in costs or expectations before it goes into effect. Does that make sense? It's always easier to do a little bit less than it is at the last moment. If you guys decided, no, we're going to do 50, we would have to go all the way back to the beginning of the process, because you simply don't want to put big expectations or costs on shareholders stakeholders without them having input. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. And my one question here regards to speaking to the board members. One unit makes sense. We have only 15 units requirement, so taking into perspective of how many units are required for LDs, one makes sense. They already are required to get 1 unit of ethics. So I'm wondering if every other renewal, is that going to create unnecessary confusion and just by default will result in, when audits come through, in this lapse thinking, oh, I thought I did it this year, I thought I did it next year, or whatever. Would that be not easier just to do it every year? 1 unit every year?
This is Gillingham, and I was thinking the same thing. I feel like every year would prevent unnecessary confusion.
And
This is Lowe. I would agree with that every other year, I think, is just right for people getting confused.
this is Ann. We felt the same way. It's every other year comes from the statute.
Therefore, it's not changeable. We cannot change language out. Is that what you're saying?
So this is Sylvie. Trying to figure out where exactly it is so that you can look at it too.
Yeah.
So it's on page 2, number 2A. It says a board shall, which means you must, adopt rules to require a person authorized to practice the profession regulated by the board to complete cultural competency continuing education. Completion of the continuing education described in this section shall be a condition of renewal of an authorization to practice the profession regulated by the board every other time that the person's authorization is subject to renewal. We thought the exact same thing. We had it written annually, thought everything was all golden, makes it so much easier on us and makes it easier on everybody. And then the attorney got involved and says, oh, no, you can't do that because it says right here this. And it's like, oh. Yeah, we were on the exact same page.
This is Gillingham. I'm just curious, other boards that are held to the same rule, do they renew annual? Do most boards, licensees, do they have annual?
So we have 16. And so if you look at the front of the bill, so page 1 of the bill, that lists a whole bunch of them. So we have several that are in here, but not all of them. All of our licensees renew annually. So you can see the first one on there is the Board of Examiners for Speech, Language, Pathology, and Audiology. I have no idea how often they renew or when they renew. But for us, it is annually. So that's a mixed question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My perspective is to keep 1 hour here, provided we only need 15 hours per year. So my preference is to keep 1 hour.
This is Sylvia. I think you remember too that we could, as maybe in about 4 or 5 years from now, we may need to address this again. God knows what will happen with the legislation, so that may change again. But we can always change it later. Like if we're having a lot of issues with people, I don't know, not doing any or thinking that they have to do one every year when they don't, we can always address it later and we can always communicate things out later. I think 1 for now is great because you don't want to overwhelm them with a bunch of stuff that we're not real sure about how many classes there are or how expensive they are. And this is a pretty big change requiring, because we've always said you just have to have 15 hours and it needs to be in something that's related to dietetics. Now we're saying, oh, and you now have to have 1 hour very specific to this, which is a big change for people. So leaving it 1 for now is good. We can always change it later. We can always come back and readdress this. I have a sneaking suspicion that this kind of stuff is going to come up at the legislation again. Because when you look at that first page of that bill and how many boards are on there, and a lot of those boards are independent, and they have a very large licensing group and a very large, well-paid lobbyist. So there's a lobbyist that several of these boards have all hired, and so there may be some more changes coming to this. So if we just kind of take it nice and slow and easy, we might have to address it again, and it won't be such a drastic change when we have to address it again in another couple years.
Doctor, thank you so much, Sylvie. Members, would anybody like to make a motion?
Oh, well, wait, there was,
What?
Julia, you're way ahead.
Yes,
Do we
discussion?
want, excuse me, 1 second, Chair. Do we want to talk about the office policy of not rolling things forward?
Oh, so that was the major discussion, but I want to make sure that we address the actual verbiage.
Could you pull up?
So
what
let's
page
go
is
to
it?
the first page of the actual rule. So we amended the continuing education definition to include, obviously, cultural competency as defined in this bill. So we did that. And then second page, number 2 on the top, it says CE credits obtained in excess of those required for the current licensure year reporting period may not be carried forward. So we as an office were having a heck of a time with this rule, and it doesn't work. So this is also where you guys may want to address, and you don't have to change it, I'm just saying you can talk about it. If you want to change your 15, because your 15 hours is every year, that's the way the statute's written. What we were allowing in the past is people to get, so say for instance going to a convention and get 75 hours in 1 year. You get 15 for this year and then can carry stuff forward. Well, that doesn't work for us, and it legally doesn't abide by the intent of the statute. So we're taking that part out. So that's why you'll see that it says for up to 4 years, however, no more than 60 annual CE credits may be carried forward. So we got some advice that that is not the intent of the way the statute was written, and so they want that out. Plus it was an auditing nightmare for us. But I want to make sure that you guys understand that and are okay with that, or if you want to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, the 15 does not come from
This is
statute.
Gillingham, and I did have questions about that change.
Sure.
So, based on what you just said, I'm wondering when that would go into effect. When would that be? When would the licensee be held to that criteria?
January 1 of 21.
Okay. And then, so you're saying basically that this is a decision that is going forward regardless? Is that, or?
Well, we need to have a discussion about it. The office would really want this to happen because it goes with how things work and the intent of the legislation and with what the direction from the attorneys. So, and I know that most of you haven't met our attorney, but we have an AAG, which is an assistant attorney general. So she works for Department of Justice, and she is assigned to us. And then she works with us on all of our 16 boards and programs. She reviews all of our rules as it relates to the statutes, and then she'll say this contradicts the statute, this abides by the statute. When we get down to more details about the continuing education, or the cultural competency, you'll see it gets a little confusing, but I'll explain why. So she weighs in on all the rules, and also tells us whether we're going against what the legislation intent was, going against what the law says. They will not support us if we go against what the law says. Obviously, we can't go outside that box. Certain things that are more of a policy call, she'll say, here's your risks for doing this and that. But she is highly involved in everything that we do. So that's where this is coming from. But I'm more than willing to talk to you, make sure everybody feels comfortable and understands why we are taking this out, or wanting to take this out.
Okay. Gillingham, so I guess one thought with this change is, it makes sense to me, but my thought is with, CDR being the 5-year cycle, that, somebody, for example, if in your first year of that 5-year cycle, you get a board certification, specialty certification, and you have 75 credits done with, then so that covers your 5-year period with CDR. And basically for the next 4 years, it's almost like doubling to maintain your LD. It's almost like doubling the amount of CEUs that you have to obtain and pay for. So that I just feel like that's a big impact for the change.
So this is Sylvia. That's why the rule's in there to begin with, because we were trying to align with that same concept. So we were not trying to make it worse. But now that when the attorney and everybody says you can't be doing this, that's not the intent, then it's like, I know, but we were trying to make it easy. But the other thing that you can do is, instead of saying 15 every year, you have the right, because the rules are open right now, to change that, say to 10. I mean, that's where this discussion needs to be. I get that it's a pain, and I get that people usually will go to, well, and I don't know so much about going to conventions now because of COVID, but in the past, people would go to a convention and they'd get all their CEs in 1 year, and then they wouldn't have to worry about it again for another 5 years because they're maintaining their CDR card. But Oregon licensure is an addition to a separate fund and has its own regulations. So that's where the conflict starts to go. But you guys are welcome to have that conversation, because we can change the amount of hours you have to have down to 10. Because then you only have to do 10 every year and you can't carry them forward, But you guys talk about that. That's more about what you guys think.
Okay, this is Gillingham. I guess I would just say that I do feel like reducing it, with this change, I would be definitely for reducing the number of CEUs per year too. I feel like that could burden agencies. So, anybody else?
This is Lowe. I would agree with you that reducing it as much as we can would be helpful.
But are there any statutory limitations to what number we can put there for CEUs?
Well, the minimum would be 1. So you could do 1.
And then
you have to do continuing education. And then if you chose to do 1, that 1 would have to be in cultural competency every other year. But other than that, you can pick whatever number you want.
Thank you.
1, 2, 5.
Other board members? This is Bragdorf. I think reduction would be valuable here to reduce financial burden and to make, we're talking about cultural competencies, to be more culturally sensitive to licensees who may be coming from various socioeconomic capacities to afford CEUs. So if they are not able to carry over their CEUs, I think it only makes sense that we would decrease financial burden by bringing down the number. I think 10 is a decent number. Again, other board members, any thoughts?
So I'm going to do a quick straw poll. Simone, are you comfortable with 10? Change it down to 10?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, Russ, I know that this isn't your license type, but are you comfortable with changing it down to 10?
No.
Russ, what would you like it to be?
15.
So you'd like it to stay at 15?
Yes.
Okay. Bert, what are your opinions?
I see a need for 10, but I think I would have to go with 15.
Okay, and Sarah?
I would feel comfortable changing it down to 10.
And Jerry, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is outside of my area of knowledge, but, nutrition education changes constantly. And so that I think that the more, the better when you get down to it. So I would probably aim for 15.
Perfect. And Yulia, what are your thoughts?
I'm comfortable going down to 10, and my rationale for that is that the RDs will have number of hours for their other certifications, and so they have 75 in addition to it. Most people gather the hours in bulk in various conferences attending, so this would be on top of it. I mean, just looking at myself, I don't want to be inaccurate, but my typical 5-year period hours, I'm clocking between 600 to 950 education hours. It's not as hard to come up with them, but just because of a lot of conferences that I attend and learning that I do, at the same time, someone might not be able to afford the higher hour requirement if they cannot carry over those hours going forward. So I'm concerned about our cultural sensitivity to those who does not have the benefits, financial benefits to afford the hours.
Okay.
I think we're split.
So, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So, if you currently and have been required to take 15 hours every year, and you're maintaining your license, you're taking 15 hours. So you're paying for 15 hours. If you go and you do 70 hours or 60 hours or whatever it is you do at a convention, and then you roll it forward, you're still paying the same amount of hours, but you're paying for it all in 1 year versus paying for it one piece per year.
Correct.
Right, so you're still, I mean, yes, it's going to lower the cost of continuing education, but it's been 15 hours for years. So it's not like we're increasing it and that's going to be a financial burden. It's been 15. So actually decreasing it is a financial gain because now you don't have to do as many. So it's going to be hard for us to put that, or to say that, you know, because we're not changing the 15 hours. It's been 15 hours for a long time. So that's kind of where I'm a little confused. I get what you're saying, Yulia, but I'm not understanding the financial piece of it.
They carry over. You're taking hours, they carry over for the licensure, because if a person got this, let's say got 3 hours this year and it's going to keep them going for the next 2 years, then these excess 15 hours are going to be covered 2 years of license. Now they have, let's say they went to conference, they got 30 hours, and next year they have to go to conference again to get another whatever X number of hours, let's say 30, 40 hours. So that keeps now paying twice, and they get excess hours and they pay for it, but they only can utilize 15 of it every year. That's my logic. Perhaps I'm not being this
is Gillingham, and I agree with what you just said, Julia. And also I think so a lot of times, like conferences or maybe a training that offers a higher amount of CEUs, they're often priced kind of, you pay less per CEU if you're doing a larger, training or something. So I think in that way it can relate to cost savings. And I do think that most dietitians, they're going to be in excess of what is required to keep their, credential. I think the benefit of just being able to roll them over, I do think I think it's financial, and I think it's just time. So.
Okay.
But that's where I was thinking cost savings, is that if you do larger amounts, usually you pay less.
Right, thinking that you can get it all done at once, and now if we change this, you're going to say, okay, well I did all that, now I have to go back and do something again because I can't carry stuff forward. I get you. Okay. So here's a downfall. So we're going to have to, this is why I did a straw poll. So we're going to have to discuss this. Your board is not full. You have a vacant spot. The intent of having a full board is that there's never any ties when you vote. You do not have a full board. You have an even number of people. And you have an even number of people who say 15 versus say 10. So that means that something's not going to pass. So you guys have to come to a compromise. So what about, and this is an option, you guys can talk about all you want until everybody feels comfortable, but here's a suggestion. You leave it at 15 and you see what the public comment has to say about that, because you can always lower it down to 10 later depending on what the public says. If you lower it down to 10 now and the public says, why'd you do that? I want to keep it at 15, then you're having a problem and you got to start over, because remember, you can't go up, you can always go down. So would you guys feel comfortable leaving it at 15 for now and waiting to see what the public had to comment on this section about?
This is Gillingham. I was comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that. Thank you for idea, Sylvie. I would like to hear from those who prefer, from the 3 board members who prefer 15. I would like to hear your thoughts and logic. Perhaps you are perceiving particular need that we are missing. So I would like to hear what you have to say about your reasons.
Perfect. Okay, Russ, you want to give her a little explanation about why you want to stay with 15?
There should be plenty of courses available. I know in my profession there's a lot of online courses, and you could go to Bend. I went to Bend one time for an inexpensive course that was 15. There's a lot of courses out there that you can attend locally or not too far. And there should be some online courses that would help supplement.
This is Pommel.
Nutrition doesn't have online courses.
Okay,
Okay, thanks, Russ. Bert, what are your comments?
there are a number of continuing education credits one can get from reading the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Very, very, very low cost, and it keeps you up to date with what's happening. And so 10 hours or 15 hours of this is very easily achieved without a great deal of financial implication.
Thanks, Bert. And Jerry, what are your thoughts?
So I would agree with Bert that it ought to be able to be done relatively inexpensively and even locally with online courses and reading journals. And so I would go with that.
Doctor, thank you, everyone.
So this is Sylvie. If you look on so I'm going to skip ahead, but we're on our rules. So right now we're on the top of the page where it talks about the number of CEs. If you go to the next page, and I'm not sure what number that is in your materials, but the next page talks about the CE credit will be awarded based on the following criteria. And then if you go to C, it says courses, so it talks about workshops, symposiums, seminars, laboratory exercise, or applied experience. So that's where people could get some CEs that's not necessarily a formal conference or a formal class or a formal anything, so that they wouldn't necessarily have to do another conference in between because they can't carry their stuff over. So, but that's, again, as long as you guys feel comfortable with it, we can leave it at 15 and kind of see what the public has to say about the 15. Hopefully they'll comment on it. If they don't, it doesn't mean that we can't have the same conversation again when we meet in December. But if we maybe leave it and let them have a chance to comment on it, then we might have some input.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
Oh, hold on, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. I just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that. So we'll keep it at 15 for now, and hopefully the public will comment on it. Let's get down to where we're talking about the cultural competency, the very classes. I know it gets a little confusing, but it's all the bold, so all the bold is new. So starting on number 6, so all that bold stuff, that's all new, and then there's an out because it's matching up with the statute. So there's an out for this does not apply to people who are retired or not practicing the profession. So if you have you're still a licensed dietitian, but you're retired and not practicing, you do not have to take continuing education. you do not have to take cultural competency as part of your continuing education, but you do have to take your 15 hours of continuing education in order to maintain a license. So I know it gets really confusing, and we'll try really hard to make sure that licensees understand this, but this is where what happens when you have a bill that's trying to do one thing, and then they're trying to mix in with our statutes that are trying to do something else. But does anybody have any question on this new, the bold language?
So every other area needs 60. Total.
So I have another question. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with this. I know where the 15 is still on the table, and we might change it. But say it stays at 15. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that 1 year you always have to have 15 credits. But 1 year, one of those 15 credits has to be cultural competency, not in addition to the 15. So 1 year you have 16, next year you have 15, then 16. I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, but that one goes within the 15. Yulia, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, and Simone, are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Russ, are you comfortable with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Bert, is that comfortable for you?
Yes.
Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, and Jerry, how do you feel about that?
Good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, just want to make sure. So it's always 15. It's not every other year you have to do 16. So it's always 15. Okay.
So we need to look at the schedule so that they can vote on both.
Right. So
We're okay with that.
moving forward, you should have. Oh God, now I've messed up my papers. You should have. So it's called an administrative rule schedule. So it'll have the health licensing or the Oregon Health Authority logo on the top. So everybody get to that page. Maria, what page is that?
40.
40. Okay. So on there, so you have today, which is the 7th. And this is our timeline of what's going to happen, so that in order for us to get the rules into effect January 1 of 21. Again, we're trying to hurry this along so that people have plenty of time to know about it and have that said 1 hour of cultural competency on their radar. Anybody have any issues with meeting on December 10th at 9 a.m.? Again, telephonic. It will be, the agenda will basically be approval of the agenda, go straight into reviewing public comment. You'll get them in advance, but then we'll have to sit there and we talk about all the public comment. We'll finalize the rule, and then we vote on the rule, and then we would adjourn. There would be no reports, nothing basically other than dealing with the rules. But I have the calendar in front of me if December 10th does not work.
So this is Youker. So about how long do you think that meeting will take so I can adjust my work schedule?
I would say no more than an hour and a half, 2 hours, if not way less. It'll depend on how many public comments we get. Mm-hmm. So you'll kind of know, because Ann will send, the public comment period ends on November 28th. So shortly after that, you'll get all those comments, because she wants you to review all them and be ready to talk about them on the 10th. So at that time you'll know. If we have like 2 comments, it's going to go pretty quick. If you have 200 comments, it's going to go a little longer. So that's kind of but I would, if we have 200, Ann's going to summarize them, mm-hmm. and you're going to have time to read them in advance. So even with 200, I don't think that it would take us more than an hour and a half to do it, because we're not going to talk about anything other than the rules and rules only.
No reports.
Okay. I can adjust.
Perfect. Anybody have issues with December 10th at 9 a.m.? Okay, so now, if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt the proposed rules as amended, because we made changes to them today, correct?
No, we didn't.
No changes?
No, we're keeping it at 15.
No, because we're keeping the 15, you're at
moving to
1.
strike.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt the proposed rules and the rule schedule, that would be fabulous.
This is Youker, and I so move.
Anyone second?
This is Connell, I second.
I'm going to call the roll. Paragraph I. Gillingham. Aye. Bagel.
Aye.
Connell.
Aye.
Lowe. Aye. Youker.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay.
Excellent, you guys. That was a lot of talking. I need to drink some water. So we are on item number 7, which is the public interested parties feedback period. So Yulia, if you would read that script, please.
One second. At this time, Board of Elected Dietitians will hear public and interested parties feedback. Members of audience, please wait until you'll be recognized by the chair. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliations to the board for the record.
Okay, so on the public phone, there was Suzanne, Jesse, and then Diane, I think, called in at some point in there. Suzanne, are you still on the phone? And any public member, if you want to speak, don't forget to take your phone off of mute. But Suzanne, we are on the public comment. Is there any comment that you would like to make? Suzanne may have hung up. Jesse, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Jesse. Would you like to make a comment? The board can hear you. The two phones are right next to each other.
Perfect. Yes, I would. Jesse Pavlinack. I am currently a clinical instructor voluntary for the Oregon Health and Science University Graduate Program of Nutrition. I recently retired from that organization. I have 2 comments, if that's possible. One about the CDR change. I was on the CDR board as of 2 years ago, so I know lots about as Bert talked about, the January 2024 changes. The Academy and CDR looked extensively into all the different licensure laws around the country, and Oregon was one, as Sylvia stated, that did not need to be changed. No one who was credentialed prior to January 2024 has anything to worry about. Their BS, MS, etc. didn't matter as long as they are registered at that time. It will be true, there was a question about this, if somebody drops their registration, they will have to meet the new requirements after 2024 and may need a master's to retake the exam. On the other hand, I was on the appeals panel for many years, and we do everything to get people leeway to renew their RD, and extenuating circumstances like COVID, fires in California, big hurricanes, all those things are taken into account to help people continue their registration. There was also a comment that you couldn't do your supervised practice without a master's. That is not correct. No changes in supervised practice. You have to have both components, supervised practice, and then in January 2024, a master's in anything. So I don't think you need to open the law for that reason. The other piece that didn't come up with your discussion about 15 hours of CEUs annually, and I know this piece a lot. A previous chair of the board, Maureen McCarthy, was when the rule went in that we had to have 15 hours of continuing education. One of the components that did not come up during your discussion are those of us that have board certifications from CDR or from Aspen that has been accepted by CDR in lieu of additional 75 credit hours to maintain our registration, hired somebody who has a gerontological nutrition specialization, and that will mean for those people who have any of these, and I happen to be a board specialist in renal nutrition, we have to pay anywhere from $300 to $500 a year to take these exams every 5 years. In addition to that, we'll have to get additional 75 credits over and above the specialization exams, which is not the intent of the CDR ruling when they made that comparison. You could have 75 credits over 5 years, or you could be a board certified specialist. So that will be an economic impact on those people within the state. And part of the reason for the carryover was for those 75 presumed hours with the board specialization. So I wanted to bring that up because that did not come up in your discussion. And I know in my former life as the manager of clinical nutrition at OHSU, we have, out of the 44 dietitians, 30 of them are specialized, and I know they will not be particularly happy with this ruling. Thank you.
So this is Sylvie. Jesse, just so you know, we're hearing you. If you want that comment literally taken into consideration, please make sure that, so you're a registered or licensed dietitian, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you'll get the email from Ann about when the public comment on the rule comes open, and please do a formal comment on that through Ann.
I would be happy to do that, and those of you who know me know that won't be a problem.
Perfect. All right, perfect. Thank you, Jesse. Diane, are you still on the phone?
I am.
Hi, Diane.
And
go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Diane Stadler, and I'm the director of the graduate programs in human nutrition at Oregon Health and Science University. And one thing that I didn't hear come up, and I suspect it might be relevant to the board, is that with the current state of telehealth taking place and virtual counseling that is taking place, many registered dietitians who might live outside the state of Oregon or who live in Oregon but are providing care for individuals or counseling for individuals outside the state of Oregon are having to extend or get additional licensures in the states that they may be providing services in. So I would also suspect that individuals who may be providing telehealth counseling or visits with Oregon patients may be asking or submitting applications for licensure in the state of Oregon. If their patients are in the state of Oregon, or if they are working virtually for a company or an organization in the state of Oregon, they may be required to become a licensed dietitian in Oregon. And so I think it will be interesting over the next few years to see how this might impact the number of licensed dietitians in Oregon and kind of the transition in and out of our licensure program. So I think it'll be important to assess and kind of quantify these changes that might take place over the next few years, given this trend towards telehealth. The other comment that I wanted to make was pertaining to the number of hours, continuing education hours. And I feel very strongly, and I will provide this as a comment when the comment section opens, that maintaining the 15 hours of continuing education every year is critical to our profession. It's not only critical to continuing education, but it's critical from a standpoint of how does the public, including our health other health practitioners that we work with, how they see our profession. And there are ample opportunities to take advantage of free continuing education that are offered throughout the state, that are offered at OHSU. Somebody could sit in on our 2 weeks of student seminars and get 15 hours of continuing education within a 2-week period of time without any problem at all, and it would be free. So, you know, from a standpoint of the cost of continuing education, there are ample opportunities, especially now, to get CEUs online without any cost. So I feel that it's our responsibility as professionals to, as was brought up, you know, maintain current education and to expand our education and to demonstrate that education, not only to our patients, but to our peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Is there anybody else on the public line that I missed? Okay, and Suzanne, are you still there? I wouldn't forget to take your phone off mute. I just want to make sure that you have a chance to speak if you wanted to, Suzanne. Okay. All right, there's nobody else on the public line, so we'll move on to item number 8, which is other board business. So Diane brought up a good point that the office has also been trying to deal with. Since COVID-19, obviously people are not physically going into doctor's offices or not physically going in if it's not necessary. So a lot of telehealth, a lot of everything over the phone or through Skype or whatever. The other thing is no seminars, no workshops, you know, because the whole, again, you know, stayed the 6 feet apart in the mask. It makes it a little hard. So the office as a whole, for all of our boards and professions, adopted a couple rules that pertain to everybody during the pandemic. So one is it allows for the delinquency fee. So if you're late in renewing your license during the pandemic, the renewal or the late fee gets reduced down to $1. So that's one thing. The other thing that we did, I'm getting into it, is for, God, we got a lot of rules. Crikey. For renewing, where is the continuing education? There it is.
Continuing education.
It's almost to the end. No wonder I couldn't find it. So continuing education hours that are obtained during the declared emergency. So we then allow for a lot more access and ways of people to get their continuing education without having to go physically to a place. So it's remote access, webinars, self-study, all that kind of stuff. So we put those rules in place. And those are, like what she had said, that's going to become a whole lot more norm as people get used to not physically going into a doctor's office to talk to them about something that they can do over the phone, which would include talking about nutrition and your diets and all that kind of stuff. So that stuff is going to become more norm. So we may need to address that at future board meetings. When we start getting information about how long this will last, we may want to start, you know, addressing some of our rules to address it. But right now I don't think there's a need to, but it's a good thing to think about for the future. Does anybody else have any board business that they would like to talk about at the moment?
This would be for the April meeting, not for December. Right?
So, and you don't have to decide right now. If there's anything, no, so not at the December meeting, because that one's going to be focused on rules and rules only. But at the next board meeting, if there's anything that comes up, anything that you want to talk about, you're welcome to email any of us here. We'll get it to Ann. We'll get it on the agenda. So you can think of things later, so you don't have to be on the spot at the moment. But is there anything at all that anybody wants to talk about before we adjourn? You guys are an easy group.
We need to keep Sarah on the phone though afterwards.
So Yulia's going to read a script, and then Sarah, I'd like to talk to you after we're done. But Yulia, go ahead and read the closing script.
The Board of Licensed Dietitians meeting is adjourned at 10:53 a.m.